how 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 priced out of their own lives they've become, right? I know this, um, because I can see it, because I can, I do that intersection between markets and geopolitics, and take it seriously because you have to, because it's if you want to be a decent markets analyst, you kind of have to know something about geopolitics, because if you're just going to analyze the markets in a vacuum, you're going nowhere. Like, you might as well be a junior analyst over at JPM, writing reports nobody reads about Microsoft, and that don't matter. And they literally don't matter. Anybody can do a discounted cash flow analysis and a sum of parts analysis of a company, and it doesn't and come up with a number that says, I think it's worth this, buy it or don't buy it, which is dumb. All of that stuff exists inside of the box, right? The box of the rules that everybody's trying to make money inside of. And we have free markets inside the box, kind of, but but the boundaries of the box are defined by the system in which capital flows around the world. And who controls that flow of that capital ultimately, and who built that system, they're still in, they still have the ability to move that money around and control that system. They control, the bar association. They control the chamber of commerce. They control the media. Like, our Western media is all British control. They don't fully control our banks, but they do control a lot of our politicians. They also have deep relationships with a lot of CEOs and a lot of grant writers and professors and think tanks and this and that and everything else. And so they shape public opinion. They shape the ideas that get put into your brain. They install those buttons, and then, like good narcissistic abusers, they push them whenever they want to make you react. Right. So one of the things I identified as I was going down this route of the evolution of my thinking about a lot of this stuff is, watching my daughter grow up while I'm trying to do this and make a living at it, and realizing as she's going through those awkward teenage years that she's seeing the world differently than I am. And I'm having trouble communicating with her because, well, in order to become this guy, I had to go through grinding years of making no money, and the household was terrible, and I wasn't the best father, and I wasn't the most available father, and I wasn't the most available husband, or this, that, or anything else. All that stuff. That, when you start to go back over that, and then when you actually sit back and you go, yeah, I want to repair all that. You have to at some point take responsibility for it, and you look at them and you go, you know what? I sat her down one day. I remember just sitting down trying to have even any kind of conversation with her where it was going to be uncomfortable. Right? I had to bring something to her, even mild. Dude, I need you to clean your room. I need you to do so. And she would immediately tense up because she didn't want to engage, because I had installed the button in her that dad's going to lecture her now. Doesn't matter whether dad's lecture is right, wrong, or indifferent. Doesn't matter. I did this wrong. And I have a tendency to lecture. You guys watch a podcast with me, so it's not like it's fucking hard, right? Imagine me doing this and then realizing, oh shit. And at one point, I'm in our junior year in high school, and we were really trying so it was 3 or 4 years ago, finally just like owning up to it and going, you know what? Now stop. I would have to literally say, stop, hold on. I know you think this is where this conversation is going, but it's not. So just calm down, take a deep breath. I need to ask you a very specific question. And it's a very simple answer. It's not a big deal. We're not here. Dad's not about to go on a lecture or a rant or anything like that. I just need you to calm down for a second. And then once I did that 3 or 4 times, and she was able to go, oh, so she wouldn't immediately get into fight or flight mode, right? And so eventually I said, look, I programmed that button into you. I'm sorry. Okay. Now we're going to work really hard to unprogram that button from you. And so you can push back as you grow up. You can push back on us, and that's fine. As a matter of fact, I hope you do, because I want you to, because otherwise you're never going to be your own person. Right. So just and then what's funny, I'm going into all of this because it's like, dudes, once you've like accepted in your own life what you did wrong, you can now apply that model around you. And you can see exactly that same kind of family dynamic as what, that's all that phrase is all over the internet now. My wife has watched if she's watched one video on it, she watched 1,000 on them, and then we sit and we chat about it. My wife is, you might as well interview her if you want to really get an understanding of the psychology of my fucking
The
household.
psychosocial. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that
I
shit's
would
deep,
love to
right?
interview your wife. It
No,
is.
you won't. Yeah, no, yes. So that being said, that won't happen. But that being said, right?
Just ask her, what's your favorite theorist?
So, when you stop and you look at it that way, you realize that the family system that, in human endeavor, in human interactions, all information is fractal,
Mhm.
all systems are fractal. So what happens at the personal level happens at the family level. What happens at the family level happens at the clan level. What happens at the clan level happens at the community level, and then the state level, and then the national level, and then the global level. If you start to use that as a model, you can then start to put behaviors of various players into buckets. I'm not saying it's wholly explanatory, it's wholly descriptive of what's going on, but it's a good way of looking at it on top of the other ways you've looked at things in the past and everything else. So when you do that analysis and you start looking at American history, you realize, oh, we have a family system problem between us and the British. We always have. And it's about that point where I started to go, look, these people are still pissed off that, we're the colony that got away, and they're still butthurt since, they started getting butthurt and figuring out how they can get their colonies back from the minute after Cornwallis surrendered to Yorktown. Now it's been the talking point. I've said it a billion times and I've made the joke, but it's true. They were
Yeah.
plotting before the Revolutionary War was over.
Before the ink
On
was
how to
dry.
destroy us. Before the ink was dry and then because they knew that we were in a terrible financial situation. We had all this individual state debt. We had all these problems. The Articles of Confederation were too weak to stand up. They're a model. They're a great model. They're a superior founding document than the Constitution is. I agree, I believe, and I'm still enough of a libertarian to believe that, but not in the context of the breakdown of the old British Empire and and France, and the rising of China and the existing British and Anglo-Dutch trade and system that exists to move money around the world, virtualize the flow of actual collateral, in this case, gold, silver, in 19th century with gold and silver, 18th, 19th century with gold and silver. And in the 20th century, it's now digital assets like US treasuries, US dollars, Bitcoin, and gold and silver. And other assets like copper and others.
So, in military, it's all in military tactics. It's all about, getting the high ground. Now, space is ostensibly the high ground, in the physical world. When you say virtualization, what we're talking about is basically time engineering. And when we're talking about money flows, we're talking about shaping the
Yes.
future, like in the sense
Yes.
that you control the choke points of energy flows. You can now, and they call them futures contracts, you can now start shaping things down the road and to create incentive structures well in advance of events that unfold on the ground.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to hear more of that. I want to hear more of the military way of looking at that. That's a great metaphor and a great way of looking at it. And I've only in recent years I've been able to interface with guys who have a military background, what I would consider a serious military background, and they've understood it in those terms. Guys like Ian Burlingame and Blaine Holt and others, they really helped me think of it in those terms. The military guys have an entirely different lingo for this, but it's exactly the same thing. We look at it. This is why I can look at Scott Bessent and I immediately cross the boundary and call him Big Gay Patton.
Yeah, I love that.
While Patton is famously now my second favorite movie behind Star Wars. Why?
sure.
Because that movie just it rewired all of my thinking, right? And I didn't really understand how great Patton was as a general in what he did. The movie doesn't even do him justice. And then
No, it doesn't. No,
it doesn't.
he was awesome.
Right. He was
Yeah.
he was immense, right? And a century ahead of his time. And but the movie's fine as a heroic or slightly anti-heroic narrative, however you want to read it. But I have always had Patton in the back of my head. Whenever I'm doing strategic analysis, whenever I'm doing that. And then, so about 2 months ago, if I've seen the movie once, I've seen it 40 freaking times. I have it on 4K Blu-ray, like the whole thing. I was like, dude, I love that fucking movie, right? But I'm hearing Tennessee. I don't know what it was. It fires a ballistic missile. Because once you light it up, oh, I can see that thing. Go kill it, because they're flying cap over Tehran. They're like, and all of this shit. So like the logistics of it are the military logistics of it. And I'm not a military strategist, right? But I'm smart enough. But I've stayed at a Holiday Express once or twice, and like I can look at this fucking shit and go, that's what's happening. And then we saw it once, and then I'm like, oh, they're going to do this again. And then by day 4, by Sunday night, I'm like, guys, realize this war's over, right? On Monday, they're going to try and close the Straits of Hormuz, because they have to start that threat now. Because if they don't, by that time, everybody will figure out that the war's over. So they have to go to, now we're closing the Straits. Now Lloyd's of London has to be activated to effectively close the Straits, because Iran couldn't actually close the fucking Straits. The only person who could control the Strait, can close the Straits, were the shipping insurers back in London. And
Well,
that's your tell. That's your tell that the two of them have been working together in this big grand strategy to keep the world chaotic, because in chaos they rule. Because if everybody is jumping at shadows trying to figure out where the next threat's coming from, that VIG I talked about earlier, all that money that moves, that VIG goes to them.
well,